28 through 70.
All right. Good evening. It is Thursday, November 7th. Welcome to the Litchfield Budget Committee meeting. We ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Now open the floor to public input. Would you like to say anything? All right. Now we'll move on to minutes. I sent out some I sent out the ones for October 24th today. The ones for October 30th went out a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if anybody had a chance to take a look at them. So if there aren't any motions, table them if you want.
I did not get to look at them.
I didn't either.
All right, so we'll put them on the list for next week. We'll table them until next week. Excellent. So the correspondence, there was an email that went forward from, I'm not sure what that is, from the town chairman regarding an item we will be discussing shortly, the budget committee representative to the capital improvement planning committee. We can read it at that time. And then obviously the minutes and agendas. I'm not sure that there's anything else that actually went through. All right. So that puts us into the new business, which includes the budget committee member position on the town capital improvement plan committee. So this, just so that the public is aware, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen sent an email stated, and I'll read it here so that everybody understands what their comments are. Concerning this subject, I know that in the past, the budget committee has not gotten involved within these committees so that they can remain an independent body for the town. In my opinion, I think it is critical to have a member from the budget committee as a part of the committee. The committee speaks directly to our joint facility tours and Andrew Cutter's call to action. I also reached out to Jay Minkara of the Nashua Regional Planning Committee, executive director, for his input. And here's what he said. I understand the sentiment of wanting to remain independent, but I agree that having a representative from the budget committee is truly valuable. The CIP is both a planning and a budget tool, and the budget committee brings a broader perspective to the committee. Having a BC rep also enhances the use of the CIP as the budget is being considered. It's an important role that should be represented. If you could take this under advisement within the budget committee decision-making process, I would greatly appreciate it. Best regards, Steve, who is the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. So the reason that came forward is because we had a similar discussion earlier this year regarding the schools capital improvement program committee, and we declined to send someone there. So we'll open the floor to see if the budget committee wishes to first add somebody to the new committee from the town. So discussion.
So I think if we're going to do it for one, we should probably do it for both. So I think we have to, I think the logic the town sent made a lot of sense. But if we're going to do one, we should probably do both of them.
I'm of the similar opinion. It's just consistency. We declined on the one, we should decline on the other. And I understand the point of view of having somebody from the budget committee, but my concern is, as you said before, Jen, that we don't all necessarily have the same opinion.
Correct.
And we weren't elected to the budget committee in order to have an input on the capital improvement plan.
Correct.
Whereas people on the Board of Selectmen or the school, that's something they can discuss during the campaign process. And then people can pick and choose a point of view. Whereas the budget committee, that's not necessarily what we're elected here to do. In my personal opinion. If anybody else has anything else that they'd like to add.
I was in the minority vote on when this came up about the schools committee. And I think it would be really valuable to have a budget committee member as a part of that process. I think it can be a discussion of whether or not we want them to be a voting member, because I think I do understand wanting to keep sort of our independence, and also the concern that one member of this committee really can't represent the entire committee, but I'm thinking of the flow of information the other way and seeing as, with Mr. Cutter's call to action and there's been a lot of discussion about wanting a broader plan about where this town is going. And I feel like the budget committee, there should be a representative there for the flow of information from the committee to the budget committee, not necessarily, hi, I'm Jen and I'm here representing the budget committee, but more of, okay, I'm an eyes and ears, and then being able to transmit that information back to us. So it isn't a huge surprise when it comes before us, and that we're more involved as it goes along. And then it makes sense to me that there should be a representative. I can understand both sides, but if we put it to a vote, I think that we should be a part of that, and there should be more overlap and more, it's been a long day. Yeah, transparency and collaboration. I think the tours that we've done so far have been eye-opening. And I'm for any measures that would increase communication between the boards.
Can we vote, could it be like a two-part vote where if we vote yes to have somebody on that board, but like, no, they can't have a vote kind of thing, or is it one or the other?
I believe we're constrained by how the board is set up by the board.
You can do it any way you want.
Okay.
No, you can.
Okay.
So if we were going to do that, then I think we should open up the discussion about doing it for the school, and maybe not tonight, but
Right.
If we're going to represent one, we should represent both. And ultimately, it'd be great if the town and the school could work together.
Right.
To, be one big happy family.
That'd be lovely. Harmony in town. Nobel Peace Prize winner right there.
So if we were to make a motion, could we make the motion to be a non-voting member of?
I believe so. Because when we're asking them to
If you
not,
want. If that's what you want, you can.
we would authorize somebody to represent as eyes and ears, but not to really influence, or to vote on something in particular.
So I personally would be way more comfortable with that, because I think from your perspective, Nikki, the flow of information, I think would be beneficial to be able to have someone come back and say, hey, here's what the town is looking at. Here's what the school is looking at, but not necessarily weigh in and vote to represent all of us.
Right.
That's been my sticking point from the get-go. So
I agree, because sure, every one of us here has a different idea of how the town should go, and the concern would
and
be,
how they should spend their money. Yeah.
and how, so to have one person there trying to push it in one way or another, which they may or may not be the majority of the board, we won't know.
Yeah.
Because we don't meet that often during the outside of budget season.
Do we have to vote tonight on that? Because Andrew's not here, so he might want to have a say on that too, right?
He sent me an email saying
Yeah,
that,
Rob's not here as
I mean,
well.
we could absolutely table. I don't know when are you guys planning to, you're already meeting though, right?
Select board meeting Monday.
All right.
Well, does anybody talk to Andrew to find
So
out if he has
Andrew
an opinion on it either way?
sent
or-
me an email. Let me see if I can get my mouse working out. Because he's, he was very open. He said, should the committee choose, I'm willing to be nominated. Oh, I agree that it is critical. I agree with Chairman Weber that it is critical for BC representation. It is the will of the committee, but my opinion is that this warrants the BC representation. And I can send that email to you, Michelle, so that it's officially into the minutes.
All right. So I'll make a motion that we nominate a person that would be a non-voting member of the, whatchamacallit, for the town.
CIP.
They're using the term
There
CIP.
Yeah.
All right, there's a motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and second. All right, so all those in favor of sending a non-voting representative to this CIP, please indicate by saying aye. 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 Non-voting was my sticking point, so by doing it this way, I'm willing to agree with it. Those opposed?
Aye.
1. All right, so it passes. All right, so then the question is, do we want to nominate someone tonight, or do we want to wait until everybody's here for a greater discussion?
I'd like to nominate Andrew Cutter. Just kidding. We can wait for everyone to be here.
All right. So we can send back the information to the board that we will nominate somebody, but we will be in the process of deciding who that person is.
Okay.
So, all
I would
right.
also be interested in
Okay.
opportunity.
Excellent. And then we discussed additional school budget review dates.
Yes.
I sent an email asking people to consider December 3rd and December 10th.
Yes.
Thoughts being that it still allows the review and gives us time, and that's when we start. Well, we'll have, it leaves the presentations where they are and gives us opportunity over Thanksgiving break and into the review process to have a couple extra meetings without crowding too much time before Thanksgiving. But recognizing they're Tuesdays, so people's schedules might be impacted. So I'm not sure if anybody has a conflict that they're aware of, whether they can meet those.
I may have a conflict on the 3rd, but should have no conflicts with the 10th.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was able to move my clients around.
So fine with that, so. All right, so then we will add the dates of December 3rd and December 10th to the budget review schedule to allow for a more in-depth and thorough review of the school budget. Just as we saw with the town budget, that one night was not enough, and your budget is significantly larger. So we will provide a little extra, so some more extra time for that. All right, so that moves us, any other new business that we need to discuss tonight? All right, hearing none, we'll move into the school budget presentation.
So thank you. Want to walk the budget committee through sort of the timeline of what we've done. I know that you received your budgets this evening. And so I want to actually start by talking a little bit about the process we followed so far. So the first thing that the budget committee should understand is that that's later than we hope to get you the budget. And the reason for that is that we did a system upgrade this summer in our e-finance, which is the software that controls all the financial aspects of the district. That software upgrade did not go as planned. It resulted in loss of data and set us back about a month. And we are still fumbling our way through issues with the update. And so the bottom line is, because of that, we had a little bit of a later start with our personnel and the process that we follow internally to get the budget developed. The school board, which has already had a full Saturday session working on the budget, actually received the budget right prior to that. And then the adjustments that they've made, plus we've been continuing to find other things that we need to refine in there. So it's all resulted in us running behind where we would like to be. Lesson learned: when a company says that they're going to do away with support for the system you're on, and you then have to jumpstart, go from 5.0 to 5.2, it's probably not a good idea. You probably ought to hit 5.1 in the middle and make sure that you iron out those kinks, because when you jump over it, the leapfrogging approach seems to be what caused all the issues that we have. So, so here we are. So that's not, it's not anything other than the reality of what we're dealing with. And I hope you understand we still have issues that we're fumbling our way through. So we're doing our best to stay on top of it. Having said that, the budget that you have is accurate and complete as we know it. It was actually presented to the school board last night, so that they had another opportunity to work on it. So there's been a lot of time and effort that's gone into developing what you have in front of you. So let me talk through the process so that you know what has come before. So we actually begin the budget development. We start talking about the budget for the following year at our August retreat as an administrative team. Because we know that it's the budget that allows us to do what we need to do, right? So it's essential that we have a solid understanding of it and that we put a lot of care into the development of that. So we start the conversations there, and then Corey and I meet with each individual director and principal to have them walk through line by line everything in the budget so that we understand where they're coming from, if there are pluses or minuses, that we know what that looks like. And then as the fall unfolds, we start to get enrollment data and other things that we can use for projections in order to begin with that budget development. So it's quite an elaborate process. So before we give it to the school board, there are hours and hours and hours of time in developing and reviewing and ensuring the budget is where it needs to be. The school board then gets it. And if you saw the Saturday session, we sat here in the room for about 8 hours going through page by page. I won't say line by line, but it was pretty darn close to the budget, and just making sure that the school board understood what was being asked. And then the board, because it was late arriving, they actually asked for a second session. So we scheduled a special meeting on October 23rd and spent about 4 more hours going through it. So that's about 12 hours of the school board reviewing this carefully to make sure that they knew what was in there, what the asks were, debating, positions, et cetera, so that they knew. And then last night had to be,
Additional 2 hours at least.
on that. So when all is said and done, there's a lot of time that's gone into the budget development. And now we're going to go through the process again with you to sort of explain it piece by piece. We'll bring our team members here to have them present so that you can ask the directors and the people responsible for the budget questions that you may have. And we'll just follow right through that process and make sure that you're comfortable with what you have in front of you and you understand it. I will tell you that we're also looking for some guidance from the budget committee. You're going to hear some pieces that unfold here where it's like, well, we could do this, we could do this. We're not exactly sure the best way to proceed. And we're looking for input. And ultimately, we're looking for support. So when you give the input, that you're willing to put a vote behind that says to the voters, this is the best way to proceed on this, in our opinion. Because there's depending on how we do this, there are some measures that we just need to make sure that we're all on the same page and marching forward correctly with, because you could play it a couple of different ways. And I'll get more into that as we get to it. So a few things to keep in mind. It's really easy to dig into the spending plan and say, okay, how much are you hoping to spend in each area? But it's really essential that you understand the budget has other components to it. So a revenue plan is obviously important also. You need to understand how you're going to fund the spending plan. So that also has to go hand in hand with it. And part of what we've experienced is with the state budget being passed so late this year and with additional revenue being allocated, it's made a little bit of a moving target for us to figure out, okay, how does that play? What do we do with that? Just so we can best understand it. And some money has been delayed until next year. So you're hearing about money that's come down from the state, but it's arriving in FY 21. Yep. So the budget that we're developing is the one where the money's coming. We don't have the money yet. So it's one of those, we just have to keep that communication open so we know where that's headed. I think it's important the budget committee remember that it's this budget that compels our team to get better. It compels us to do what we can for students to make sure that we're programming the best way that we can and that we're hitting all the needs of the individuals. And so it's really the curriculum instruction assessment that we thrive on. That's what we are here to do. And we need to make sure that we have a responsible budget in order to deliver that. That's what our parents are counting on. It's what our students are counting on. And so this is the way that we get to that. So what are our major goals for this year? Major goal number one is to have a budget that will allow us to fulfill our mission, allow us to get our work accomplished, allow us to continue to get better and stronger as an organization. The second major goal is the passage of collective bargaining agreements. Now we have the teachers' agreement. It's huge that we pass that with the special election. And that puts that question to rest for 3 years. So that's a really important position for the school district to be in. And it's the right thing for our teachers to know where they are standing relative to their employment in the district. But we also have a support staff agreement and we need to pass that. And so we're busy negotiating, working hard to try to reach an agreement. And we're hoping that we're going to have an agreement to bring forward to the voters this year. As you know, we hit a stalemate last year. We were at impasse. We didn't bring a bargaining agreement forward, but that's not what either party want to see happen a second year. So we're working hard to have a CBA. As it stands right now, we're still at the table. We're still negotiating. There are still points that are not agreed upon. So we'll keep at it. The deadline for that is really January. And so we have to be done sooner, but the legal deadline is in January.
Yeah, the legal deadline might be January, but
Right.
we have to have our warrant articles voted on in advance of that.
Understood.
So,
So we're working hard to have that done. We don't want to belly up to the January legal deadline.
no, we've done that. That didn't end well for anybody.
Nope. So we're going to do our best to have something. So what do you think the deadline is?
I would say end of December. I mean, we have in the past gotten the agreement the day before the January deadline, and
Yep.
that's pretty much an automatic no because people don't have an opportunity to review it. So I would encourage you before Christmas, so people have a time to opportunity, at least my opinion, is to, I mean, we vote on warrant articles. I mean, I don't know if you've seen our schedule, but voting on school warrant articles in December.
Right.
Obviously, we can meet, we could meet in the first week of January if we had to, but
So what is the deadline? Because
so in the past, we've gotten them in December. So in advance of, we usually vote on them when we vote on school warrant articles. But we have in the past pushed that longer because we have to have everything filed in advance of the budget hearing.
so I seem to recall the last couple of years, we've had like a tentative, like
Right.
Tuesday or Thursday in January.
We keep it open. I don't think we actually have anything that's officially scheduled.
I guess I would just say, I don't know if it's fair to say, like, if you're gonna wait until January, it's gonna be a no.
Well, it's in the past that the position of the budget committee is we need it before the final meeting. And so if you put it to the day before the final meeting, I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to end well because people need the opportunity to dig into it and to review it.
And I would say, I don't know that it's fair to say that on behalf of the whole committee.
All right, fine. I would still encourage you to be done before Christmas because that gives people an opportunity to review it more thoroughly and ask any questions and push stuff. And if we go to the first week in January, we're not giving people an opportunity to buy into it. So I would encourage you to wrap it up before.
But I mean, on the town side, we just had a new meeting on the 30th that we planned like 6 days in advance. So I think that's a blanket statement. That's not necessarily representative of.
In the past, we've encouraged them to be done before Christmas. We can alter that to the first week of January if you'd like. And because we technically have until the budget hearing, I just don't know. All right, for me, I can guarantee you that that will not end well for my vote. I mean, we know now.
Regardless of what it is, if it comes to you in January.
How will I have time to review it? I will not have time to look into it. If I receive it the day before the meeting, I will not have time to dig into the details and give you my support. I'm
Right.
not asking for anything unreasonable to have time to review it.
Respectfully, I think that's very short-sighted.
I appreciate your opinion, but we've known this, we've been negotiating this for 2 years now. It's not unreasonable to ask for it to be done by Christmas.
Well, I certainly will bring the sense from the chair back to the parties at the table. But the collective bargaining process, as you know, is messy with a lot of parties involved. And so we'll do our absolute best. I mean, I would have liked to have settled weeks ago, but here we are, right? So we'll do what we can and keep that under advisement as we plug ahead. And whatever the date is, I do hope the committee will understand that that it represents hours and hours and hours and hours of hard work. And it certainly deserves the due diligence to understand what's there so that we can then decide what's best for the school district going forward. So, but that's one of our major goals is getting that collective bargaining agreement. We're talking about our custodians. We're talking about our school secretaries. We're talking about our food service workers. We're talking about the paraprofessionals who are there, taking care of individual students who are in need. It's an incredibly important position in our district. These are people that that we depend on in order to make everything come together. And at the end of the day, you have to remember that most of the people who are in the support staff association live here in Litchfield. So you're also talking about your neighbors, your friends, and the people who are paying taxes here too. So it's really a piece that I think we just need to keep in mind as a major goal for us to get settled and wrapped up. The other piece is that the capital plan, so the school has had a capital planning committee that's been meeting. And we had several meetings, have started to come together with pieces. Our goal is to have information to pass forward to the town. And we do want to work in concert with the town to make sure that it'd be awful to have competing capital plans that we can't execute because everybody's needs are so great that nobody gets anything, right? So we want to be working together to make sure we have a comprehensive plan that addresses the needs of the school and allows the town to address its needs at the same time. So that's understood by the school, but we have facility needs that we need to get after. And there's been a lot of delayed maintenance. There's been a lot of issues kind of kicked down the road. I think people who did the tours saw some things that have been delayed and that it's time for us to get after. As much as Monday, we had a high school that was 60 degrees because the heat wasn't operating. And it's, it's because the system relies on humans to override this and connect that. And it's just not the way a system ought to be operating. And so I think we finally were able to get the heat on. And I think the part is still coming our way.
The part came in and it has been fixed. So we're up and running. It came in a day earlier than they anticipated, and they were able to fix the system. But on Tuesday, our heating company had to come and actually jumpstart the boilers, because when they were running at full tilt. And if they left them running overnight, now you've got a 100-degree building, and nobody wants to be in that either. So we actually had a company monitoring it until the part could come in. And fortunately, we had to pay for 1 day of monitoring, and they were able to get it in the next day.
And that's just shared with you as one sample of what we do daily. I mean, we're dependent on people to step in and to flip switches and override things, because things are just not operating the way they ought to be. And so
Our control system's name is David Ross. He goes from building to building, closing dampers, opening dampers, just changing everything.
You got the best one. You have the best one. Between him and Sue Air.
He does a phenomenal job,
Yeah.
but it takes time from other things that he needs to be doing.
that's right.
So
And then the last goal to point out to the budget committee is just remember that we are a people organization. So we have people at the heart of what we do, from the staff who work hard to make all these things come together to the students who are at the center of it all. I mean, we're doing this because we're in the human enterprise, and that's just so important. It can be easily caught up in numbers on a page, spreadsheet analyses, percentage increases, et cetera. And you forget that you're not applying that to widgets. You're not applying that to some product that's cranking on an assembly line. You're applying that to human beings with individual needs. And so keeping that human dimension on it, I think, is really important going forward, because, we can get ourselves caught up in some of the number aspect of it and forget that that's really critical. So having said that, I want to start with an overview of enrollment so that you can see what it is that we're looking at. So this is an enrollment projection sheet that's coming your way. And I can assure you that we have our eye on this all the time. I know there's two principals sitting behind me who just volunteered to come tonight, and they watch the enrollment numbers very carefully. So the other piece that I want to hand out with that is the class size policy, so that you can see what it is that drives the decisions we make relative to the enrollments, right? So they go hand in hand. So I want to talk about class size for a minute. The board has actually examined our class sizes and made an amendment to the policy last year. I want to remind you of that amendment. And that amendment was made in kindergarten. And what we learned is that with our 4 and 5-year-olds who are coming into kindergarten, and especially with the needs of students that were being presented to us, we wanted to decrease the class size guideline in kindergarten to 18. For many of these students, it's the first time they're in school. And so making sure that they're in a class environment that, again, can meet their individual needs, we reduced that number from 20 down to 18 in order to ensure that they would be successful. Grades 1 and 3, we kept the number at 20 as a class size guideline. Grades 4 and 5, we left it at 23. And then in grades 6 through high school, 25 is the class size guideline. So those numbers didn't change. And they're relatively, if we compare it to our peer group, those numbers are relatively similar to what we see. There's nothing that jumps out there as unusual. On the back of the class size guideline, the board actually incorporated the budgeting procedures. This was a separate sheet that I don't even know the origin of it, but I know it was in the hands of budget committee members in the past that talked about what the trigger number would be. So,
Yeah, it's been around for 20 years.
but it was never in board policy. So the board,
That's because it got voted down by the voters when it was presented.
so the board now has put it into the policy statement so that we're not trying to find a separate document that's somewhere. It's all integrated into one. And it just gives us, it puts into operation what the class sizes on the front side drive you toward, right? So it's all in one spot for us. So if you look at the enrollment projections, I'll walk you through where we are and make sure you understand. The top part of the chart has historical information going back to 2007, 2008 school year. And we have broken it out by grade level, and then it's total by school. So you can see the Griffin number, the middle school number, and then the Campbell number. And then that adds up to an overall enrollment for the school district, pre-K through 12. As you work your way down, the orange bar is the projection that we made a year ago. So when I was sitting here a year ago talking about our projection, that's what we were using as our projection number. The next bar in green are the October 1st actuals, which is what the orange bar was projecting. It was saying on October 1st of next year, this is what we think we're going to have. And if you work your way across the orange and green bars and do a comparison, you'll see that we weren't too far off. Our number at Griffin did go up by 7 students. So we had a little bit higher enrollment there. And at the middle school, it went up by 17 students, which was a surprise to us. And Principal Lecklider has not let me forget that we underestimated his number, and he's got more than anticipated. But that's the reality of what we have there. And if you look at it, it really speaks to the 7th grade number. We were projecting 80 and we got 94. So that was the bulk of it. And, digging in to better understand what happened there is something that we still need to be able to answer. But that's where the real increase is. 14 of the 17 are right there. The high school number, they were predicted to be at 431 and they came in at 438, which is just slightly below where they were last year. So those are the current numbers against that projection. The yellow bars then used a table at the bottom where we do a 3-year average and we say, okay, what's happened in each grade over the 3 years? How do we take that and then apply that to the class that's rising against what we've seen for pluses and minuses in order to get the projection? So looking forward to the 2021 year, you can see that in the case of Griffin, again, there's a prediction that it will continue to increase. In the case of the middle school, it's showing a decline again, but that's not what happened this year. So you just have to keep that piece in mind. It does go down slightly, and the high school also goes down slightly. The other numbers I want to bring to your attention are at the bottom of the school column. So for example, at the bottom of the total 1 through 4, you see the number 43 sitting there. And that's essentially the number 5 years out. So the 22-23 number minus last year's number. And it's showing that over time, Griffin is predicted to grow by 43 students. Okay, so that would be the 340 going up to 383 for a 43 student gain, just so you see where that number is coming from. So that's an important part for us to keep in mind because we've seen that increase at the elementary level. This table is not taking into account people drive around town and see a new house and say, oh, there's kids coming. We don't know. We're using this on historical projections. So there are unknowns that go into this, right? When you see a development going in, I think there's one across the street, and what's the impact of that? 15 new houses, what's the impact of that? It's probably going to have some impact. We're hoping, of course, it would be spread like butter and it would not be everybody with a first grader coming along, but you never know that that's the kind of thing that can happen with developments. The middle school, on the same token, you can see over that 5-year time is predicted to go down by 10 and the high school is predicted to go down by 70 because the numbers that we're seeing are at the elementary level. Now, people who come to town tend to stay in town. The students then continue through the system. And so at some point, you'll see that the numbers shift a little bit. But in the immediate upcoming era, that's what we're looking at for enrollment projections. So I'm going to pause a minute and see if you have questions for me, or if I didn't explain something well, somebody can jump in and make sure I'm as clear as I can be on it.
I'm just curious with the increase that you saw this year in seventh grade. I mean, I'm just looking at that one grade, maybe because I have one in that grade, but like now when you look at that next year, 2 years out, 3 years out, you're projecting it to decline. Is that just because that group has been lower, or is that based on like historical trend of what we see for kids that end up going to private or?
So actually, if looking down the seventh grade column, it's actually.
I'm just following that grade along.
Oh, that grade along.
Yeah, so if you look at that grade, they went from 80 to 94, and then they stay 94 for the following year, and
Yep.
then if I'm reading this right, they go to 89 and then down to 87. I mean, I know it's just a couple of kids, but it seems like if that group is growing,
That's right.
Is it
It's-
just based on?
It's the historical of what's happened with that grade level. So,
Okay.
typically ninth grade is a year where students will, or families will choose another institution,
Yeah,
for
got
example. Seventh grade is also, so again, I'd have to dig in a little bit to this. We were just talking in the office about, other institutions that age out. And then in the past, our families choosing us over other institutions that they may have chosen.
Yeah.
We've talked about, we'll pat ourselves on the back for a second. The one-to-one initiative has been huge with our families and our students, right? It's transforming the way we operate. That becomes an attraction for people that the school district's operating on a one-to-one, certainly grades 5 through 12. So is that a reason why people would choose us over a school that doesn't have that as an option? We don't know. But the point is, those are the factors that I think come into play on it. And does that then impact what will happen down the road with other families? Possibly. The other piece somebody said to me is, they're just aware of their neighborhood that is right now a bunch of, for lack of a better term, the empty nesters who are in the house that they've already raised their family in and are thinking of, it's probably time to move, maybe somewhere warmer would be attractive kind of thing. What's that impact, right? So that's not reflected in these numbers, but, people talk to people and they hear that and it causes some worry and some anxiety with it. So again, these are projections based on historical data, but times change, circumstances change, and there are things that come to bear on this that we're not even aware of and you can't predict.
So these were done internally though? We're not hired. We used to hire out projections. We're not doing them.
So we hired this out last year and we learned the methodology and we applied this internally using the methodology. And if you remember, we used to use like birth data, I think was factored in, right? But that was found not to be reliable because just because somebody was born, it didn't take into effect all the other factors and then moved. So we felt this was a better way to proceed using the actual historical data. So I'm going to shift off to enrollments for a second. The one thing to keep in mind is that you see something like -10 at the middle school. How does that translate into staffing? Doesn't really have a major impact on staffing because 4 grades, 10 students, you're not talking about a shift that's going to have you add or subtract a teacher necessarily because, again, when they get spread out across the school, there's no direct impact that can be, quantified on an individual class, even with the high school. So you might be looking at 70 and saying, well, that's got to translate into people. But not necessarily. You have a comprehensive high school. You have graduation requirements that need to be met. They have to fill individual categories, certification issues that come into play. So it's not as simple as saying 70 divided by 25 represents 3 teachers, right? Because you have to figure out how to execute that, how to put that into action. And so that's a concern. It's a number we're going to keep our eye on. But we can't destroy the quality of Campbell High School, which has a great reputation. And it's done because education is individualized and is performed. Our students have come to count on courses that will open college doors and opportunities that will be available to them down the road. And you can't just take that number and do some simple math and turn it into a plan. All right, so a few other things to hit. Just a reminder for the board, you're going to hear this. There's going to be a major theme in a few minutes when we get to the special services budget. But the budget that we're developing has to work for 20 months from now, right? So in June of 2021, we still have to educate students on the plan that we're making now. And so, we do our best work to try to figure this out and to get it as tight as we can and to be responsible with it. But we also have to be aware that we can't just decide in April that there's no more funding. We can't do the things that we need to do because the budget was developed so tight that unknown things came up and tied our hands, right? So we have to have, a responsible budget that has a degree of flexibility to allow us to still operate 20 months from now. This thing doesn't even start for 8 months. First dollar of what we're talking about will be spent 8 months from now, and then it's got to last 20 months beyond, or 20 months from now. And Corey will tell you this has been an evolving process. There's been a ton of work and a ton of adjustments and a ton of things that have happened along the way. So it's really an evolving process. And the last point I want to make is it's an absolutely transparent process. If you have questions, ask us, we'll answer the questions. We sat here on television for 8 hours going through it and answering everything. So, every now and then we get hit with somebody who feels that we're hiding something, we're not being transparent, that we're not communicating as clearly. That is not our goal by any stretch. We want to be clear. We want to be open about it. We want it to be a transparent process, and we welcome the opportunity for the budget committee to help us do that. And so it's just an important factor that we all work together to make sure that people understand this is how the budget got developed and what it represents. So those are my opening comments and opening stances. I'm going to turn it over to Corey, who's going to guide us through more of the detail on it, and then we'll get into our director guests who will be walking through their individual budgets with you.
All right. Well, good evening. Third time around. Hopefully I'm really figuring this out now. But anyway, just joking aside.
You have to have some levity. Otherwise it gets
You
boring.
try. So I provided a document tonight, trying just give an overview, and I provided a bunch of numbers and stuff. Some of the things that I just really want to note, I don't want to, Mike said a lot, and there's some things in this document as well that just reiterate some of the things that he said. A lot of the financial stuff, anything that's based on tax rate, any of that type of stuff, they really are for estimates and just for discussion value. At this point, the tax rate for this year has not been set yet, in part due to the special election that occurred. So for this year, we had to go back into the budget after the election, after the article passed, and add year one back into the budget. So FY20 as approved in March is now FY20 as approved in March and in October. We had to add the cost items back into the budget. So the information, the district clerk just signed the MS-22 for me, so that I can send that up to the state DRA and we can get rolling with the tax rate setting. We're not the only town. We're not late, really, because if you look at the 2019 tax rates, there's a lot of towns out there that have not been set yet. I'm not exactly sure if it's DRA that's way behind, or if it's just people are having problems getting the information that they need to get everything squared away. But we're right in line with everybody else. So the hope of having a single tax bill, I believe, is a reality, because we're not the only town that's going to go out a little bit later than is normally expected. The operating budget, the total gross appropriation as shown, includes all funds. So yes, it shows up as 24 million, but that's the general fund, grants fund, and food service funds. Grants fund and food service are not funded through taxation. They are funded through food services self-sustaining program, and grants come through federal and state money. So it's all reimbursement based, and we receive that money back after we make expenditures. I will note, because I know the question will come up, food service was subsidized last year out of the general fund. Major reason of that being that in order to improve the program, we had to invest money into the program, and we also had to invest money into staffing being increasing hours in certain positions, made those people eligible for benefits. So the money that was actually subsidized for the general fund can be directly attributed to the health insurance that was picked up by those individuals that were working for the food service program.
A quick question.
Yes, sir.
You say general fund, is that money that was budgeted before, not spent, and then slipped over into another fund, kind of
No.
overflow kind of thing, or?
The general fund is the operating fund for the school district itself.
One of them is like $1 million, which isn't the general fund, the million?
So
Okay.
we have a bottom line budget. So all of the money goes into, we use the different departments and lines to help figure out what we think is an appropriate number. But then they have the general fund, which they can divvy up as they,
Is it like the towns?
that's the, you're talking the reserve.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that's what I'm asking, so
No,
it's not like the town's revolving
I
then.
think
Yeah.
because the other night when Troy was explaining it, he mentioned that when Brian asked where does the money go, and Troy said it goes back in the general fund. It's different than the school district.
so the town can keep a certain percentage in their funds, which they need to do for like cash flowing purposes. The school returns theirs.
All right, so they don't.
Whatever
have-
is not encumbered. So there are encumbrances with end of year funds.
21's food
Those,
service, 22's
that's a
food
different
service.
situation.
So if the school district budget is $20 million and they only spend 15 million,
Mhm.
they have to give the majority of that 5 million back to the taxpayer.
Okay,
We don't carry money over from year to year.
great, thank you.
So as you look through the budget, you'll see like noted up in the corner, Fund 10 is our general fund. That's the main budget that you're voting on, the major one that we review. So that's all the departments that go into that. And then you have food service, which is our Fund 21. They're a self-sustaining program, except in the case of last year, unfortunately. And there's Fund 22, which we don't provide a budget for because it's all federal grants based. Those budgets are developed as the grants are submitted to the state. And then we enter it directly into the system. There's no way to predict exactly how that's going to work. It's all different allocations from the federal government.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So to Carrie's point, I said in there, like the reductions, all the work you guys do, looking in, it is by municipal budget law. It's a bottom line budget. It's not that we don't take value in the things that you review and the things that you look at, but when it comes down to it, we are looking at a budget that's going into effect in 8 months, has to get us through 21. The things that we're predicting today aren't necessarily what's going to happen in June of 2021. So the school board has the discretion to allocate the budget. If there's a priority, we maintain that priority. We apply the cuts where we most think they fit our operations. If there's something that comes out of here that we think, oh yeah, that's the best place to do it, we do follow that advice. And also throughout the year, we do perform budget transfers. I'm running out of money in maintenance in one school. I got to move it out of the other school. It happens a lot, I have to admit. There are things that will come down the line. Insurance, health insurance. We have a rate that our health insurance provider provides us, guaranteed maximum rate that you're looking at an increase no higher than 10%. We budget for that because at this point, that's what we know. Within the next couple of weeks, we'll have that rate. If it comes in at 10, our budget's good. If it comes in lower than that, we'll make the reductions as they come in. Dr. J talked to our process starting in August. So this has really been going through this, and we've had the e-finance troubles, which is still a challenge going forward. It caused a lot of problems in our personnel budgeting system, making that budget be behind. But I think finally we're in a pretty good spot. There's just some quirky things that are going on right now. As you said, school board received their budget the day before, I think as a digital copy. Received their books the morning of the meeting. So it's really been a struggle to get here. With all that said, I will go through and just mention I provided 5 documents or 6 actually that go through certain things. The first one is where we started with the superintendent's budget going to the school board on the 19th. Started with that number, and I've gone through each meeting and provided a detail of the additions and subtractions that have been made to each account on the second page, it shows where we ended up on this.
So it's attachment 1.
Yep. And where we ended up and what we'll be starting with tonight. This is representing a 3.6% increase in the the budget over last year in the general fund.
And that includes the updated contract?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you look back in the tax rate history, you will see that when a CBA has been approved, there's a spike in the change in tax rate to account for that, and then it levels off for a couple of years. Then you get a new contract, it spikes again.
But I think it's important to note though, just that as we go forward, that one of the reasons why it went up is because the contract passed.
Mhm.
So people shouldn't be surprised because
Yep.
it's been approved.
Mhm.
That part's been approved.
Attachment 2, I've noted in the past that our budgeting software, the reporting software, if the board approves for FY19 budget items to be carried into the following year, our reporting software picks those up in the prior year budget. So FY20 is inflated by those amounts. So this is a reconciliation of those budgets and where they hit. I also made a note in the detail of the budget itself too, to show if an account was impacted by this, what amount. Okay. FY20 looks a little off.
I appreciate
The numbers don't look right. So this will help to be able to reconcile. So it looks more in line and shows you what the approved budget was. I will also note too that, and I didn't do a reconciliation on this quite at this point. I can. Those encumbrances also impact prior year actuals on the budgeting report. So we can do a reconciliation for that as well to pull those amounts back out. Attachment 3 is a department by department, what the increases were. In certain areas, you'll see a jump in the school board. That's due to increasing the budget for legal fees based on 3-year average and ongoing negotiations and the amounts that we're sending to the attorneys. Special services has an increase due to mostly tuition and the needs of the students that are coming in with those special needs. Transportation, a 3%, that's just based on the contract. And facilities, there's a lot of things that we need to get to. So we're showing an increase in there. Really trying to put a lot of effort into getting things done in these buildings because they've really been put off for a very long time. Attachment 4, as I said, it kind of gives a basic revenue and tax rate estimates. As said before, these are estimates. I don't know. I'm hoping I'm pretty close on what it's going to come in at for 2019. We should know. We'll know better within a couple weeks. Attachment 5 being a tax rate comparison going back to 2013, where you can see the spikes. I think 2016 was the year the CBA was enacted. The last CBA, I believe it was 16 through 18. Is that correct?
Through 19.
Yeah. So you see a spike in that year within the tax rate. And then the last one would be, it goes by house valuation and impact year to year on an individual property valued at those levels. I will make, actually, on one note, you will note back on attachment 4, just so that I mention it, is that down towards the bottom of the page where the state funding, the education grant, education tax, there's the additional state funding, which will be ongoing for the allocation for this coming year that will impact the FY21 tax rate is going to be $425,000. Next year, I believe it's $525 will be impacted. It's right around that level. So that will be ongoing funding from the state. Let me see. Last couple things that I want to mention. Default budget. It's always a question of when that's going to come. I'm going to work on developing that over the next couple of weeks to get an idea of what that's going to look like. The state changed the law regarding default budget last year, so it's a little more complicated than it's been in the past to develop that default budget. So hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'll have something to bring to the budget committee. And let's see, I do have, I know at times you request an Excel budget. I do have one in Excel available if anyone would like it, or I can forward it to you.
Yeah, if
Gary.
you could, because I know Andrew will
Mhm.
appreciate that.
I will do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
That's what I have, unless anyone has any questions for me at this time.
Not yet.
So we've laid out the next 3 weeks, the way that we're going to introduce the budget. And so with us tonight are Devin Bandersky, who is our Special Services Director, and she can speak to the Special Services budget. We have Mary Woodman, who is our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, and she can speak to our curriculum development budget. And we have Jason Pelletier, who is our Technology Director, and he can speak to the technology budget. So how would you like to piece those through? Up to us? I'm going to start with Mary.
Russell, it doesn't matter.
I'm going to start with Mary because I think it's perhaps the easier one to hit.
Curriculum.
Famous last words, maybe. We'll see.
Easiest, and yet it impacts everybody. So.
And yet it's the heart of our mission, right? So, there you go. So reminder that Mary's in her second year. And so that puts her in a nice position to have seen the
Kid
budget
gloves
go
come off.
through and figure out how to make some tweaks and adjustments to it. And she's going to start walking us through what she has developed. So
Okay.
you have tabs, right? You all have the curriculum. So curriculum development section, curriculum section.
So what is coming around is the executive summary for the curriculum instruction and assessment budget for the FY21. I will admit a much easier process going through, having gone through this last year. Our focus continues to be alignment pre-K through 12. As I mentioned last year when we first started this process, really bringing the district together and having all of our curriculum be aligned and not be in grade level silos, which tends to be what can happen. Our focus last year was on math and revising that curriculum, which was a very successful process. And now we're moving into the assessment phase there. This upcoming year in terms of curriculum development, along with moving into the next stage with math, we are looking at our ELA and social studies curriculum this year. That is in progress right now. So what I'll talk about through the budget drivers really are things that tie into that curriculum realignment and programmatic shifts that will come along with the new development of the ELA and social studies curriculum mainly. So big budget drivers for the curriculum budget, some of which are, as you'll see, the lines 270, 271, and 272, yes. Those are our course and workshop reimbursements for LEA, LSS, and our non-union employees. So some of those have shifted a little bit because they are not dictated, and I'll get into that when we look at the variances, but that key chunk there, the LEA, the 67.5, that is contractual. Those numbers are written into the contract. So other big budget drivers for the curriculum budget are about $33,000 in software, our conferences and workshop reimbursement for district initiatives, 17.9, and textbooks is about 20,000, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. When we look at increases, our textbook line is up about 9,500 over last year. And I use the term textbook line because things such as online textbooks still will fall under that line. That may get shifted as we start looking at programs and things of that nature. We may decide to go with a software piece and we would move the money there. But what we are finding now is that as we are running up against the end of our ELA contract and as our social studies contract was not consistent, we did not use the same program K-12. I'm finding that we use different programs at different times. Some were replaced, some were not. We are finding that the technology is no longer being supported. So we ran into that this year, that a couple of our online social studies resources are no longer, they no longer exist. So we're now scrambling to try and find resources to support those teachers, because the companies discontinued the online resources that we had been using. So we have to, since we are doing a full curriculum revision in social studies, that is an area that we really I put a lot of textbook money into, so that we can make sure that we have resources K-12 for at all of our levels for that subject area. So you'll see that is a bit of a bump. The other thing that appears to be a big bump, a big increase, is the course reimbursement. For the union, the 271 line, it appears to be up by 22,500. It actually is not. What we found in that, through streamlining our process of reimbursement with our My Learning Plan, we have two different accounts that reimburse for courses and workshops, and we actually combined them into one line so that it was easier to basically ensure that we are using all of that money, and make it easier for the bookkeeping. So although it looks like a big increase, it's actually there's 22,500 that has been removed from the 320 line. So it really is a level fund. A few other decreases, and I should mention that a lot of the changing in the curriculum budget really has been due to shifting money around, that things were split up by building, by group, whereas with the goal of really looking at things through more of a district lens, we shifted things from building level lines into a district level line, so that we could bring teams to professional development activities that branch all three levels. And that's what you'll see in our key decreases. In the course reimbursement, the non-union course reimbursement line was decreased by $4,000. The LSSA conference and workshop reimbursement line was decreased by $5,000, and the contracted services was decreased by $2,000. All three of those lines were brought in line with the 3-year average, based on what we've paid out over the last 3 years. And finally, the 2213 320 lines, there was one for CHS, GMS, and LMS. Those have all been zeroed out, and that money was reallocated to the district line, to the line 10. The fund 10, excuse me. And that's my general overview.
Why don't you walk us right through?
You want me to walk
Yeah,
right
we got
through everything?
Page 1, see if there's.
All right.
Well, and as I know that for some of us, it's our first time looking at this, and I think when we get really close to this, some of the acronyms might get confusing.
Sure.
It might be helpful the difference between like LEA, LSS.
Sure, absolutely. So looking at page 1, we start with our district-wide conference and workshop reimbursement. Those basically are things that trainings that we ask teachers to go to, AP training, Project Lead the Way, when we have new teachers that come into the district or taking on new courses. Last summer, we did a lot of vertical alignment, professional development. We brought teams to different conferences and workshops, really looking at competency-based education. That is what that 272 line really is focused around.
Really important, I think, that the committee understand that part of what Mary and I were tasked with was making sure professional development was there for our teachers. If you look at that line in particular, you'll see that the actual amounts were relatively small in the past in terms of what was spent. And it increased quite a bit last year, into this year, I should say, because we have an obligation to make sure our people are well trained and are getting what they need and have the current methodology. So that's been a huge focus from the board,
Yes.
a direction from the board, an outcry from our faculty that they want the training. And so we're delivering that.
It's been something that so far, I would say in my first year, has been a huge success. We've had a lot of and I actually presented it to the board at one of the last board meetings, the number of staff members that have been involved in district-wide PD opportunities. And these are separate from, I mean, all the teachers and support staff all have a budget that they can request to go to individual conferences, workshops, courses, things of that nature. These are things that we said this is a priority as a district, you know, and asked people to go, or said who wants to join us. And I mean, we sent 25 people to the design studio this summer. We had 45 staff members that took part in a week-long training around curriculum development and technology at the end of the school year. So just really, that has been a focus to shift it from individual people going to workshops, which is very valuable, and we want to encourage that as well, but also to bring in more opportunities for us as a district K-12 to be getting the ship moving in the same direction. So along with that, there is some travel at times, so we kept that line in. That's been consistent with the 3-year average. Supplies, I kept that stays pretty low, but there are always cases where we need books to support other, like, more targeted professional learning, things of that nature. We do have a food line. I will tell you, with the number of workshops and after school things that we run, that is pretty important to the teachers. That's how I can get them there sometimes. Laugh, but it's true. Publications are, as you can see, those are just some of our, administratively, we subscribe to like the Marshall memo. We use that as part of our district administrative PD. We meet bi-monthly and we discuss some of the articles that come out of those. It's a weekly subscription.
Principal Lonergan sent homework to us today.
Oh, I did not get that yet. I'll have to.
It's waiting for you.
All right. Excellent. Homework. You'll see the textbook line. Within there, it is elementary ELA support resource kits. The elementary ELA program is one that we're finding some tech issues based on their use of Flash. And as that's going away, we're having some problems with the online portions there. And we spent a lot of time this summer training some of our teachers, our kindergarten and first grade teachers, on using Foundations as a supplemental resource as well. So we are looking to bring that up to grades K and 2 for next year. So that's a specific, that's a little more targeted. But then for the secondary ELA support materials, there is some money in there. As we revise the curriculum, there may be some needs. And the updated social studies resources, K-12. That is the big chunk of that, because we know that there is going to need to be a major overhaul in programming for social studies. Software, most of that is pretty much in line with what was there last year. The Project Lead the Way, we've been part of that program for a few years now, and that stays pretty stable in terms of the funding. One of the changes that, if you were to compare last year's breakdown to this year, the benchmarking progress monitoring software, that number is the same. Last year, we had it broken out by NWEA and Ames Web. And one of the things that we've been looking at is trying to cut back on the number of formal testing like that we are doing with kids. So we're currently in the process of investigating not using both systems, maybe transitioning to one, looking at our state, the state testing supports their modular assessments that give us the same feedback. So we're reassessing that. So I didn't want to tag that specific to the systems that we had currently been using.
I'm going to suggest before we turn that page, if we've used an acronym you're not familiar with, or see something that you would like explained on a quick look, we can certainly do that.
If you have anything that's contracted, if you could let us know that, because those are things that obviously we can't touch. That's under contract. If you have a contract
Right.
with
That's
somebody,
actually will be on,
that'll be
I think
helpful
those are
too.
on the next page.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions?
Not yet.
All right. If we flip to page 2, the only other thing in the 2210 line are dues and fees. Those are contractual professional dues to the NHSAA. Moving down into 2213, we get into the 270 course reimbursement. These are for non-union members, basically our administrators, SAU staff, things of that nature. Looking at the amount that has been spent over the last 3 years, we did drop that to keep it in line with a 3-year average. The 271 line, that's the teachers union. That is their course and workshop reimbursement that is contracted. So that is, and that includes both we have to account for 180 per person for workshops and 360 per person for courses. And those lines have been combined into one line. That's why you see the increase over last year. And the 272, the support staff conference workshop reimbursement, there is not a set amount in that contract. There is contracted monies in the collective bargaining agreement. But we looked at, again, this is only year 3, but in looking at what has been spent out of it last year and this year, year to date, we did cut that, still leaving us with some room if we had a huge influx of people taking advantage of that this year. Contracted services, those are any consultants that we bring in. We've been working with Bill Atwood for as a math consultant, a math coach. So just looking at that, we dropped that in line with the 3-year average. And the only other line on this page is our district software, which this covers our My Learning Plan, which is our professional development tracking software. Any questions on page 2?
Yes.
Yes.
The contracted services,
Mhm.
bringing in some math tutor. So is this above and beyond teachers?
It's a math coach. It's actually somebody we worked with him last year. He comes in and works with our teachers, K-12, on math instruction. We used him looking at trying to bring more personalized centers into the classroom in general.
They're teaching them how to teach math, I guess. I don't.
He's coaching the teachers on methods. So he's really into kinesthetic movements that go with the math lessons. So it's a way for students to learn it. So for example, he teaches them to say perimeter. So 4 syllables with their hand, and then they remember that perimeter is the one that goes around the outside of the shape versus area, which is what you fill in the middle. So you'll actually watch students taking a test and it'll ask perimeter and you'll see kids sitting there going, and then they know what to do, right? So he's standardizing and teaching students the importance of that kind of mnemonic device to remember what's being asked with mathematics. That's a small snippet.
Right.
Brian,
One of the
what he
other-
does, but it's the kind of thing he coaches them on.
One of the big pieces that we brought him in to work last year was on like station rotation, which is really trying to get classroom teachers to be able to find ways to target the instruction at the individual student needs. When you have 25 kids in the classroom, it's not always as easy as being able to, you might need to work with this group of 5, but what are the other kids doing? And really helping teachers come up with methodologies and activities and things that can help facilitate that so that they can target the instruction to the individual groups as needed.
And he's really an expert at kind of games in math. And so student engagement goes up because they're engaged in a puzzle or a game with a solution that like really makes sense to them. So it's just a different methodology. And our teachers, I mean, they understand the mathematics. They know, 2 + 2 is 4. But getting that across, reinforcing it in a variety of ways, that's what he coaches them on.
And building their toolbox.
That's right. And it's actually cheaper to bring somebody in and present it all to everybody than to send everybody out to individual conferences with him with sub coverage and the whole 9 yards. So it's actually a more effective, cost-effective way. And then everybody has a common experience too. So, Mary and I in the copier, hey, I tried this thing with Bill Atwood and, we've got something in common to talk about. So it's more effective than she went to a workshop. I went to a different one. We come back, hey, I went to a workshop. I learned this. Oh, I learned this, but we don't have anything in common about it, right? So this is we feel a better way to go about the PD.
Any other questions on that page? Okay, last page, page 3. Everything's been zeroed out, so. And again, it's been reallocated.
Right.
So again, looking at when I first, as you can see in this current year's budget, there had been different amounts allotted to each building. And in looking at it through a district lens, as we're trying to bring things along and aligned, it just made more sense to be able to say we want that all in one fund, and we'll send people as to the area, to wherever the area is most needed.
Any questions? All right.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
So next up, we're going to shift to technology, and Jason Pelletier is going to join us up front, I think.
That would be the preference, just for the mic.
And he's got his one-page summary to walk you through, and budget lines.
All right. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So the main budget drivers in technology this year are the one-to-one. So this last year, and you'll see the change in the numbers. Last year, we only did the 5th grade with Chromebooks. So you'll see an increase because the 9th grade and 5th grade are receiving new Chromebooks this year, part of the one-to-one. So the nice part about that is we're finally on the cycle. So 5th graders will get their Chromebook for the one-to-one program and have it for their tenure at LMS. And then when they go to 9th grade, then they'll be issued another one, and that'll be for their tenure in at Campbell. So it'll be kind of that regular cyclical budget event that you guys will see every year for that.
So what happens to the ones that are getting phased out?
This year, what we did was we brought those down to GMS. So GMS received a lot of technology that we didn't necessarily have to additionally budget for. And so we added more cards, gave the library more technology, and kind of try to spread that out down there. The other big budget driver for this budget is the 5-year replacement plan. So it was projected about just under 108,000, but able to shift some stuff around. One-to-one, again, able to remove some technology that the one-to-one was able to fill. So we were able to get that down to 87,700. So that was nice to get that down. You'll also see some large increases in certain lines. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're an increase. We've moved a lot of funds into something that kind of made a little bit more sense, like the telephone and data communications. We just shifted that up to the district level because it's pretty much all that equipment now is up there, instead of having a bunch of equipment at each of the schools. And then all the phone lines and everything come out of the high school and everything too at the district level. So to kind of make things a little bit cleaner, make more sense, this is how much data and telecommunications is costing us instead of spreading it out. The other thing too is with the one-to-one, when we first ramped up, we were buying a lot more Chromebooks, and now that we're kind of stable in the in the grade levels, we're not buying as much, so we don't get as much leverage. So a lot of times we're able to get some nice software subscriptions, and one of them was Go Guardian, and with that, so get the free subscription, or they're able to include it into the cost. And we found that it was a really nice, useful tool for classroom management. We're no longer able to get that leverage anymore, so we pulled that, and the actual annual cost is $9,000 for that. So you'll see an increase there for that. And then you have the $30,750 for the CHS Chromebooks for the one-to-one. And then the other piece in here that you'll have is an additional $17,820 for a SIM software tool. It seems like a lot of money. It's basically the state put out amended an RSA. So it gave technology, student, teacher privacy data. It put a whole bunch of control mechanisms around there that we need to follow now. So this software helps us find out where vulnerabilities are in the software, helps us mitigate them. It lets us know how to mitigate them. It helps us keep an audit log, and these are all things that the law, and in that summary, I put a shortened URL so you can actually see what these minimum requirements are, so you can review them. But audit, accountability, scanning for vulnerabilities, all those things. So this tool will do that, and it's kind of it's an exhaustive process. There's a lot of stuff. There's vulnerabilities all the time. You'll see it in the news all the time, like ransomware, this, that, whatever. So instead of hiring another body or two just to do this, the software tool will help us to actually do that with the personnel that we currently have, and still attack that, and then still check off that checkbox from the state so that we're compliant.
Is that a yearly
Correct.
cost?
Yep. And that is for that type of tool. That was, we went out and we looked, and that is the least expensive one that does what it's supposed to do.
So why don't we go kind of page by page, walk through what you have. This one's a little bit shorter also, but it'll give us a chance to make sure you understand it. And again, we'll pause after each page if you have acronym questions. Not that people in IT get into acronyms at all.
Yeah, no, never, right? So start off with GMS for the instruction, computer network support and maintenance, anything that they need in the classroom that might need to be repaired or anything. That's been pretty much level. The supplies line, that's pretty much a building level. So the buildings kind of have control over that line and what they want to use that for. If they need toner, printing supplies, computer lab supplies, they'll pull from those lines. Software subscription for learning how to type, the library software, the licensing for the smart interactive software, and then some rostering programs in there as well. Then there's the replacement for unrepairables, things that break down that we need to replace, as well as replacing aging smart boards and projectors. So lots of classrooms, every classroom's got interactivity, and some of them are old, and we update them the best that we can. And then if something that we can't get parts for, then we'll fully replace it with a new system.
Now, is that just is that an allowance, or has there been an inventory done within the building to actually get a reflection? Because I know my two boys both had smart boards that pretty much didn't work most of the year. So do we have an inventory of actual needs versus an allowance?
Yeah, it's really a lot higher than what's on here, but we try to do the best that we can, knowing that and I do have an inventory of everything. But like at GMS, that's probably where you have the oldest interactive boards and whatnot. So we try to attack it as best as we can. And then we found that last year, a lot of parts we couldn't even get from Smart. So little cameras that help with the interactivity, try to order from them, 8, 10, 12 weeks to get a part, not the right part. We don't stock it anymore, stuff like that.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to raise your budget. Lord knows that everybody here would not never would propose that I would try to add to the school budget. But the thought is, if we replace 2 a year, I mean, at the number of classrooms that are in there, I mean, you'll be, 15 years before you replace them all, at which point you've lost by a third of them. So what is a realistic plan for addressing the technology needs of those? So I would just encourage you to actually take a real hard look of, don't tell me 2 a year and then that's not the real need. What is the real need? I mean, I'd rather avoid encumbrances and shifting and just put the actual number here instead of doing a balance transfer somewhere else later. So I would encourage you just to take a look at that.
Sure. And I can add that into the 5-year replacement plan.
Right.
And then pretty much for LMS and CHS, you'll see going forward, it's very similar, except you'll have the addition for the Chromebooks on the 734 line. And then
And I guess I would have the same comment there too, because it looks like, just a realistic, what is the realistic need?
right,
Yes.
yep.
So tell me what you think I want to hear. Let's see what it really is.
On page 2, with CHS, same thing. You have the Chromebooks. And then further down, you have district-wide. So training, Infinite Campus Conference, workshops for us for the IT department. Then the HB 1612 audit that goes back to those state standards that I mentioned before. Those are also unfunded. That's an unfunded mandate. So
That references a House bill then, I assume.
the House bill and that RSA are all kind of part of the
Right. So
the
the
same-
HB isn't like some, the name of some company for software. It's House bill. It's related
Correct.
to, okay.
Yep, correct.
Huh? You look backward.
And then there's some professional services. So if we need some advanced consulting, something a little bit higher level than what we can usually do, if we need a gold seal of approval on something that's highly important, we'll pull from there. And then as you follow down at the end of 2, we start, it's the renewal cost for our firewall, web filter, routing, does all a whole bunch of stuff, threat management, everything like that. Any questions on 2?
I don't think so.
And then we have repair of equipment. So this goes beyond just like computers and printers. This is for servers and a lot of back end high level equipment. SAN renewal for maintenance. That's high speed storage for where all of the storage is for all of the servers and everything like that. It's on a high speed box. That's the maintenance for that. 1-year support for the servers and our antivirus. And then if you go down further, the licensing for what it costs for us to have Office, the Windows operating system, server licenses, Creative Cloud. And then you'll see that's where the SIM tool was for that I mentioned earlier. Go down to a little bit further for cell phones and telephone service. Building connectivity and internet, that's the service for how data gets from the other schools up to the high school and out through the internet. And you'll see that through each of the buildings as well as the district-wide. A little bit of travel, infrastructure, supplies, networking, tool replacement, repairs, then backup software, other software for things that we need to do at the back of the house for just managing things. Virtual server support, imaging, and this is where you'll see that GoGuardian addition right there. And then a little bit further down is part of that 5-year replacement plan. So it's basically replacing 2 labs at the high school and then replacing district-wide wireless. Any questions on 3?
I'm just wondering, just looking and thinking of, what is it, line, what is it, 272, the conference workshops. I think sometimes it could be helpful. It's not the only thing that matters. But thinking of averages and what does staff typically use, where, do you have a sense of like where does the 3,800 come from? It's back on the previous page.
Oh, sorry.
For conference and workshop reimbursement. Because I think
Where-
sometimes
yeah.
what happens is we can in general, we look at what's gone up, what's gone down, and then, something gets level funded, but we're never actually getting up there. So I'm curious.
What
where-
we have that in is Infinite Campus is our SIS software. So a lot of times if they have like a big change and we need to send our database administrator, that will a lot of times cover that. Sometimes they don't have things,
Okay.
but sometimes they do, and it's really important for her to get there so that she can then train, set things up. Then there's a little bit of training software that we use just to, there's the new server operating system. What are the new things? A test environment, things like that. So we'll pull from there out of that line for getting some of that training from there.
I think one thing to note is Jason's the director of technology, but his entire IT department is 3 people for the entire school district. So there's a lot on them. So any training that they're able to do and that they need, it's extremely important that they're able to do that because they don't have the flexibility of a big staff.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And then on 4, this is where we do like a lot of this is outside the classroom, again, back of the house stuff that people don't usually see, right? So this is server room, switch closet type stuff that we usually do is infrastructure upgrades, phone support maintenance, wireless controller maintenance, and then you'll see a couple of lines that have been moved. Those are those big lines, the 531s and 532s that we moved to district wide. Some more supplies for the network side of things. Then you'll have the software, the nursing software, Infinite Campus itself, and then network switch replacement is in there as well. And then you'll see that replicated at LMS and down at CHS as well.
Your question on back on 738.
Yes.
You're replacing 2 labs, right? 58 desktops. How long do they last?
We have it for five years as part of the replacement, the 5-year replacement plan. So we'll get them warranted and we'll get the advanced warranty for 5 years. They're covered. And if they're towers, that's tower and monitor.
Thanks.
Then on to 5, you'll see CHS replicated, very similar to the other schools. And then we go on to District Technology Services at the very bottom. Questions on 5. And then page 6 is, those lines have also been moved out, so nothing really on page 6 either.
Any other questions? Any questions at all relative to the IT proposal? All right, hearing none. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Just before Jason leads to, I want, just so the whole budget committee, we continue to look for ways to save costs in the technology area. So we had a committee meeting this afternoon looking at the student information system, which is Infinite Campus. And so you understand that's what drives everything relative to the student side. So all our state reporting is done through the SIS. Report cards are generated out of the SIS. Attendance is done in the SIS. So it's really our database of all the students and families. And so we're looking for, do we have the best program? Is it meeting our needs? Is there a different program out there that would better meet our needs? And can we find something that would be more cost effective also? So, so those are the questions that are in front of this committee, and we're examining what's there. So we're always looking to try to do this better, and, sort of scratch that, hey, this software also, it's redundant to another piece of software. So it would actually replace, so you could eliminate this by switching over here because it's got other features with it. So, we're always examining, can we do better? Can we be more efficient at the way we roll this out? So that's hot off the press. No decision yet on it, because you don't want to just go cheaper and not have it meet your needs either. So you got to make sure that you're getting what you need to operate as a school. But just so you know, we're always paying attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then that brings us to special services. So Devin Bandersky is going to join us right up front. Devin, you've been in the district how long?
This is my 8th year.
8th year. And so there is an awful lot that falls under special services. So before she launches into the budget, can you just hit all the realms that this budget hits? Because special education is one component, but you have other pieces that you also oversee and direct. So I want to make sure.
Yeah, so this particular budget is for special education. There's also English language learners in there. There's some costs that tap into other areas. But for example, 504, a lot of those costs you'll see when the schools go over their budgets because it's under the guidance lines for some of the needs of students. So there's different special services aspects in different budgets.
And you also wear what other hats though?
So I oversee special education, 504, homeless, homeschool, English language learners, foster care involved, court involved, case manage the out-of-district students, and then I'm the district truancy officer. So when I create the budget, I'm looking at all of those facets for all of the students with varying needs and trying to make sure that I'm capturing the best I can in the budget. So I know when I started creating the budget, I had 235 students with educational disabilities under special education in mind. And as of today, I have 242. So even with that, there's a shift in need. And we had an out-of-district placement, and I know the school board made an adjustment to tuition in here to capture the cost of that. So I'll talk about that further as we're going through. So
if I could just note a couple things before we get into Devin's budget. I know we have a lot of conversation in this committee every year about special ed always has an underspend. There's always too much money in there. Last night at the board, I went forward and after talking to Devin yesterday, we are looking at putting together the amounts we will be pulling out of the reserve this year, because at this point in the year, combined between out-of-district tuition and transportation, we are $44,000 in the red. Overall, there's only $50,000 unencumbered within her budget, and we're only in November. So we have now reached a situation where we're in critical, and we will be reaching out to the trustees to get some money to replenish some of those funds. And to be honest, I'm not even sure. I don't know if we're even sure if what's in there is even enough to get us through this year. So just I'm not crying wolf or anything, but this is the realities of what happens within special ed. One student with a critical need, a residential placement, these things impact your district in a major way. So there won't be an underspend this year. I can pretty much guarantee that.
And I asked Devin to talk about the hat she wears because it's overwhelming. I mean, when you look at student services, it's because you have individual students with those unique needs, and it's not just a special needs population that's identified and legally entitled to services. We've seen an increase in students with non-native speakers, right? So we need to make sure that we're providing that service. So it's a shifting demographic. We have to keep in mind where we're located. We're adjacent to Manchester, not far from Nashua. And so as families make moves into town, they bring with them differing needs that haven't always been here. But Devin picks that up. The homeless piece is another one that when students find themselves homeless in one or two places, it could be a Litchfield student who goes homeless, or it could be a student from another community who goes homeless and then finds their way to doubled up housing in Litchfield. So, a family that moves in with grandma and grandpa, for example, would be homeless, and they have a right to an education and they're entitled to services, right? And we have to provide that. And so here comes Devin.
Which one includes transportation. So there definitely have been increases in some of those areas that we haven't historically seen over the years. So in some years, by the time we end the school year, we may have had 6 students that at one point or another were homeless during the school year and have either become permanently housed or moved on to another school district. At this point in the district, at one time, we have 8 students living in transition. And so we've not hit that point all at one time. So that's certainly new. And we definitely had students with respect to the ELL population that moved in that were non-English speaking. So that was, we certainly have students that are requiring the English language, but do have some English to be able to navigate the classroom and so forth. But we did have students this year that were learning the English language for the first time in our schools. So there certainly were, you'll see an increase in cost just in interpreter services because we need to make sure that parents are understanding what it is that they're signing for. When there's a field trip form that's going home, we need to make sure that they're understanding what the request is and so forth. So you'll see an increase there.
I'll also note that on the revenue side of the equation, some rules have changed in regards to Medicaid distribution for services for students. You'll notice in my budget for revenue, I've budgeted $1, where traditionally I've budgeted 100,000. We don't know exactly how we're going to get access to those funds because, and Devin can speak more to those restrictions, to the degree of some districts are now hiring RNs to be able to diagnose in order to get access to the service.
Yeah. So most districts at this point are not, they're not able to bill for, and we're in that boat as well. We're not able to bill for any Medicaid to schools reimbursement due to an emergency rule that went into effect August 27th. That rule will be in effect until February 24th.
So what's the new rule?
So they imposed an emergency rule, and so they changed who can order services for Medicaid to schools. So there's certain services such as speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, paraprofessional support that supports communication, mobility, safety, behavior, any of those things. And transportation costs to and from school when a child is receiving one of those services on that day. Those are all different things that we could seek. In years past, we could seek reimbursement for. But with the emergency rule, they have stipulated that it has to be a physician, a physician's assistant, or a nurse practitioner that orders the service. We do not have any of those that are on staff. So the state is still working on what that's going to look like. If the state, through the Department of Health and Human Services, is going to hire a physician to assist school districts with seeking those. If we will send letters to physicians of children explaining and seeking reimbursement. So those are all things that need to be worked through. But with respect to how much we receive in reimbursement, I think last year was around 137,000. It doesn't make sense for us to contract with let's say a doctor and pay them to review files and order the services because then I don't think we'd end up really making much out of the equation once we got the reimbursement. So pretty much at this point, most of the districts in the state are kind of at a standstill as we get further clarification with where to go. So hence the reason why there's $1 in there. So even for this year, the budget that passed, there was obviously anticipated revenue that was used to offset the budget last year. And at this point, we won't come close to what was anticipated.
We average 100 to 150, somewhere in that range, in that revenue source. So that's just a source that we're uncertain about at this moment. Should be over $1, but
Right.
you know,
So what if there's like a form letter you can give to the parents and have their doctor sign it or something?
And that's what we're working on right now. So I'm staying very involved with the movement that's being made in groups with the state so that as soon as there's something actionable that we can act on it and move forward with that. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm done
perfect.
interrupting you.
So with respect to my executive summary, it highlights the key budget drivers. Last year, for any of you that were present on the committee, special services overall in some of those areas was actually down. You're going to see the complete opposite this year due to change in student needs and so forth. So really the three key budget drivers that I have is tuition, transportation, and professional services. Those are the really heavy hitter areas in my budget, but they're also driven by IEPs. So we're talking out of district placements or some type of related service or special education service, and then transportation to go along with that, that are all stipulated per IEPs, which are legal documents. So I'll go over those when we're going page by page. But a lot of the information that you'll see presented in the budget are really in place for us fulfilling our obligations under New Hampshire law RSA 186C, which is the special education laws and regulations. So I don't know if it'd probably be easier just to go right to the budget. So page 1, you'll see 330 professional services. There's no increase or decrease. And all of the services listed there are related services in students' IEPs or needs stipulated by teams making decisions for students. So that takes into account the needs of the students that I knew at the time when creating the budget. And obviously there's ebb and flow either way, but I did my best to capture the need as presented here. You have legal services, which includes Primex, school district attorney. I kept it the same. I know historically we've been around that 3,000, 4,000 mark. But at the same time, if anything transpires, they are hefty bills. Travel includes costs for staff that are providing in-home services, doing home visits, going back and forth. It also includes costs associated with any school-sponsored trips where we need to send and pay for the paraprofessionals to attend and support the student on trips. So that's what you'll see there. We do have the admin fees for Medicaid billing listed there under 890. We use a third-party biller, MSB, for our Medicaid to schools billing. I don't know where that will go. If we're not billing anything, we're not really paying them anything. But at the same time, I'm really hoping that things get remedied and we have a plan. So we're going to need to have those costs included in there. The para-educator network, we have a network, we pay licenses for our paraprofessional staff, and it's professional development that they can do on professional development days, and a lot of them do in their own time to continue to grow and develop. And we've had that for quite a number of years.
Devin, can
I
you
got a question on 569.
Oh, sure.
Was that like tuition to what?
Oh, so there was, can we email them out the?
Yeah, we'll get the notes. The system has been quirky on me.
I was gonna say, because usually we have a
It removed
breakdown.
the note.
Yeah, so it's in the first
I will
draft.
send you
I
the
don't
note.
know.
Okay.
That details out it's the different schools out of district that
So it is in the
students are sent to.
first draft, so it covers the cost for out of district placements for about 10 students. So we can email out the schools, which is usually what's in there. It has the school, the number of students, and so forth. So that's what that is.
Do you have to do that?
Yes.
This is like $50,000 per kid.
Some of them are higher than that.
So it
And
depends.
if they get
So
residential, they go even higher.
residential
Why do we have to pay
placements.
this, I guess. I mean, I'm ignorant to all this stuff. So
Single.
legally,
It's
what?
legally obligated that we pay for it. They're within our
Devin, walk Brian right through it so he understands. Why would a student be in a
Sure.
residential and? Yeah.
So the special education laws, they call for a continuum of placements. So that is a range in which the education for a student with and educational disability can be provided. So least restrictive would be being right here in one of the schools in Litchfield. And for some of our students, their needs are so complex that we're not able to meet their needs within our schools. And so we need to find a school that is more appropriate to meet those educational needs. So a special education day placement, which could be here within New Hampshire. There are a few schools that are right over the border in Massachusetts that we can transport a student to. They're educated in the most appropriate placement, and then they're driven home. And so all of these listed here are day placements. We have had students in the past that have been residentially placed. And that can just be based on their educational disability and not having a school that addresses that area of
Medicaid
need.
subsidize any of that?
For some of the placements, we're able to submit for special education aid through the state. We do have to meet a cap, and then we submit for reimbursement, and then the state will reimburse the school district a certain percentage. So that has fluctuated anywhere from 66% up to, I think the percent I saw for this year is 91%, and that's just based on the funds that have gone over the cap.
Okay.
And then that'll be revenue that comes back into the district.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, let's see. Page 2, acuity for 504 management. That is our 504 management database. So that's what we utilize to create and generate all the forms associated with 504. We've had that for a couple of years. We have evaluation and supply materials
Just before moving past that, so the $83,000 increase is mostly driven by the tuition line.
Yes.
So when you see that, that's like the sum of that section, right? And just to speak to your point, Brian, in some cases, a student may be identified in another district, but then the family relocates to us and brings that IEP and placement with them. So it's not always a situation that we've identified, but it's something that has been identified in the educational community, but then the family moves here. So those can be the surprises where we say a family's moved in, and by the way, they have a child being educated in a certain out-of-district placement, and we then maintain that because the child's successful and it's working there. So sometimes we can succeed in bringing a person in, but not always. And so, just keep that in mind too, that it's not, I don't know how to say it. It's not that we've given up or we've identified that we can't do this.
No, we'll exhaust all resources
Internally
and do
first.
everything that we can to maintain a student here within district. But we had 2 students last year that moved in at some point during the year who had educational programming that was already in a more restrictive placement. And those situations happen. So we meet, we discuss, and we decide whether or not we're maintaining. But we also have to keep in mind that the mental health needs of students are very complex, and there's certain things that don't show up in students until they've reached adolescence. And so needs change even at that level. So, we may have high schoolers that we're finding something that's a little bit more appropriate for them so that they can be educated. Do you have any questions on page 2? That's mostly supplies and so forth for the GMS special education program. Page 3, it's a continuation of supplies for GMS, and then it starts into LMS. There's cost for repairs of equipment and warranty maintenance for FM systems. Those of you who have been on the committee have seen that year over year we get our FM systems maintenance at the end of every school year. Any questions there? I don't really know what to explain here. Any questions, page 4?
What are the community experience outings and gift cards, line 890?
So our students, so we have a developmental delay program at the elementary school. And then once we move up into middle and high school, we have what's called Student Support Services Program. So it's our students with more diverse learning needs. They might be with us until they're 21. So we go out into the community and try to work on generalizing the skills that they're learning in school out in the community. And it's important to make sure that when we're working on specific communication skills in speech lessons and in classroom, that it can be generalized in more than just the one-on-one instructional session. So students part of that program will go out into the community. Gift cards, we're trying to build up the functional life skills aspect. So they might be creating a budget, identifying food, going to the grocery store, purchasing those ingredients, and then coming back and working through how to cook themselves something or a snack or different things like that.
You probably mentioned it. I could just be tired, but ESY.
Extended school year. So for all students with educational disabilities, we have to determine whether or not they need a continuation of programming over the summer.
Okay.
So 180 days works for most students, but some need more. And that's the extended school year.
And so some of our students attend 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks over the summer in order to keep that structure, maintain skills, prevent regression. And so the level of programming that we provide really varies, all dependent upon the specific needs of the students that we service. So I would say we have anywhere, well, we've combined our GMS Summer Academy, so it's students with varying needs, but I would say in total, we probably have about 120 students throughout the district that are continuing schooling over the summer. Page 5, any questions? I don't really know what to.
I think that's just.
Page 6. So if you're replacing an FM system, do we also need to, is that a different system than the one you're maintaining? Because I would think if you're replacing it, then you wouldn't need maintenance that year.
Yeah, so we have quite a number of systems. I'll have to get an updated number total, but we have some that are nearing age out, so they're only good for so many years, and then we have to replace them. So the ones that are still good will be reserve maintenance, and then we might have to replace. Page 7, any questions?
So
Okay, so
school
3
psychologists.
Yeah, so 3:30. So this summer we had a resignation of a school psychologist. So we attempted to fill the school psychology position, or did not have any applicants. So we went with a mental health clinician that can provide the direct counseling services per IEP. So we filled that position with that, but we still need a school psychologist to provide all of the cognitive and academic testing. So we contracted with a school psychologist to fulfill that aspect. School psychs in New Hampshire is a critical shortage area, and I don't see that improving this upcoming year. So I chose to maintain the budget as we're filling it right now. So that's why there's the cost under professional services under school psych. That's the cost to continue contracting with the school psych for the testing portion, and then maintaining the mental health for all of the counseling needs. And I just feel that's best at this point. I don't see being able to fill the school psych position. So I wanted to make sure that we had the funds to be able to meet the IEP requirement needs that we have.
I just think just statewide have more psychologists retiring than people graduating out of school. It's
Yeah, they're expecting probably about almost like a 3 to 4 year drought, so to speak, until there's more that come into the field. Page 8. Page 9.
On the Psych Services, but just under 734, because you're having the one you're just talking about, we're on page 8,
Yeah, on
basically
330.
doubled. The psychological services went from 44,345 to 98. An increase of 54,000.
That's with the
That's
with the contracted school psych services. Yeah. Page 9. Page 10. And page 11 includes that lovely transportation line. So there's an increase there of 25,000. The first cost that's in there is the contractual increase that we have with our current bus student. And then the needs that I know of right now. I'm not sure that what I've budgeted is going to be enough based on the fact that this year we're currently at like negative 23,000 for transportation costs. Any questions?
I don't have any yet. Anybody else have any questions on the special ed budget?
just taking it all in.
So if I'm reading this right, the whole special ed budget went up by 160,748.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it for now. Thank you so much.
Yep.
So as you review those items at home over the week, if you have any questions, please feel free to email them to me and then we will distribute them through the school board.
Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to speak to regarding the budget?
So just, so next time, I don't know if you want the directors who presented today to come back, or Corey and I can probably field most of the questions. I think we know the budget. I guess I'll leave it up to the individual directors.
Yeah, if you want, leave it up to them and then we'll try to figure out who's which we'll review on which days, since we just added a couple
Yep.
for the budget review, because that's where the nitty gritty will really come down.
So next time, we're going to bring the three principals here. So we'll review Campbell High School. So if you want to look ahead into Campbell, feel free to do that. But we're going to take the same approach, slow and steady, walk right through it. So we'll have Bill Lonergan going through the Campbell budget. Tom Lecklider will be here to go through the middle school budget. Scott Thompson will do Griffin's budget. And Lauren is our food service director, and so we'll walk through that budget. So those are the four that are next. So we'll take questions for curriculum, technology, and special services, and then we'll present those three budgets. I don't know the purpose of the added meetings. We've laid this out in a timeline, so we're going to present the budget over the meetings that we scheduled.
Right.
So we had 5 meetings that were on the calendar that was approved back in April. So we presented tonight on some of it. We'll do the next third at the next meeting, and then the final third on the 21st.
Right.
And then we'll be back on the 5th to answer any questions. And if we need to.
So that's where we added the third. So the concern is when we went to the town budget, we found that we went a lot more in depth, line by line, and we couldn't get it all done and be out of here before saying 9:45. Preferably 9:30 for our some people. So by adding more time, it allows us people to do that deep dive in if they want to, without being here till
So
midnight. Which isn't a problem for me, but some people complain.
Yeah, so whatever the budget committee needs to do, but we're
Right.
going to be here on the 5 dates that we're scheduled to present and answer. If you need work sessions or whatever, but our folks are out with school board meetings, negotiation meetings. We have a lot of night meetings, so we'll follow the timeline that we were given and make sure that we answer any questions you have and bring stuff forward. And quite frankly, I'd rather come and stay late on a night than come on a second night. So, selfishly for us, it's just easier to be here. We're here at this point. We'll plug
I'm
right
with you.
in. So we'll stick with this timeline for now and see where we land.
Yep.
I will point out that the time allocated to the budget committee exceeds the time allocated to the school board. So the school board was able to get through the budget in the timeline that was allocated in less time than the budget committee initially asked for. So adding more dates doesn't really help that. So we'll try to get it done in the time that we have, because it's more than what the school board had with it.
All right. So there was a question about school tour dates for those who could not
Yes.
attend during the day.
Remind me, I think Bill, Carrie, Jess came during the daytime, right?
Yes.
Andrew was with us.
Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew.
I'm happy to take folks through the buildings on either another day if it's something that could be arranged. I will tell you, I think it's more effective to see the schools in action when students are in there, but I understand you have work commitments too. So
I think the goal too is if by doing a night one, we didn't have to worry about privacy concerns. It could actually record the tour.
happy
And
to,
the sounds and stuff in the background, just the ambient sounds would be more conducive to a video walkthrough. So not just our people could see it, but townspeople as they see.
Sure.
Oh, wow, look how much I want to invest in schools. Oh, it makes sense now.
So happy to do an evening. It might be best again so that we can just hit 3 buildings in one night, and it'll probably be pretty quick if there's nobody in the building, so we can zip right through and show what we need to do. I will have to arrange I think Dave needs to be with us because first of all, he's got the keys and can get us into places.
I'll have to make sure he comes in a little later that day so he can make it through the night. 'Cause he
Yeah.
usually goes to bed about 7.
He's in the building at 5 usually,
Yeah.
so we need to.
Make sure it's a warm day
Figure that out.
naturally, so it doesn't have to flip all the switches.
Yeah.
Or train somebody in case he goes out with sick or something.
Do you have a date in mind?
I think we had met, there was a discussion of the 13th, I believe. You want to do the opposite of
Evening.
school board meeting, because obviously you
Oh,
would
yeah,
be
yeah.
otherwise engaged. So,
So you're looking at Wednesday, the 13th of November?
if possible, I believe.
Training during the day, but I'll be back.
Yeah,
I'll
I've
be back
got,
in time for that.
I can probably make that. What time are you looking? What would
I won't be.
What's the earliest start you could do?
Early start.
Who would be,
I think it's the two of you in particular. Rob's pretty familiar unless he wants to go. And Jen said, don't plan around her since she's intimately aware of all three buildings, having students in each. So it's really the two of you, I believe that would be.
I'm thinking like 6 or 7, but
Can you do 6? Because I think he'd prefer 6 to 7.
6 at work.
Well,
Oh, that's right.
we're not going to get it done in an hour.
No, start time.
Yeah.
I figured you prefer to
6 to
start.
7. I
Yeah.
thought you said prefer 6 to 7.
No, you would prefer to start at 6 as opposed to
We're running.
7. Yeah.
Does that work for you, Nikki?
Yeah.
6.
All right. So Wednesday the 13th at 6 p.m.
Let's start at Campbell because I'll be there. And so come and find me in the SAU, or I'll meet you out in the lobby, and then we'll go from there.
do we want to see if our friends at LCTV?
And then I'll put in my request right now if you guys could consider whether you'll be available that night.
I'll see if we can line somebody up.
So they will try to line somebody up to tag along for that. Thank you so much. I think I actually hit everything on my agenda for you guys this time.
Do we want to discuss, there was some earlier tonight, the discussion about if we have voted to have a budget committee person on the town side for the CIP?
I think we want to wait till more people are here. We can, I have it noted, reopen. So I'll put that out there.
Just in terms of
We can just
asking if it makes sense to them at this point.
Well, we can ask them. So earlier tonight, we did vote to add a non-voting member to the town's capital improvement programming committee. Whether you guys are far enough along that you'd rather us hold off, or would you welcome a new member should the committee decide to send
So
a non-voting member?
We've been welcoming a member and feel it's been amiss to not have somebody part of the conversation.
Okay.
So we've been meeting on the first Wednesday. So right before the school board meeting, we meet here at 4:30, and we'd be happy to have somebody voting or non-voting to join us.
Okay.
There's nothing secret going on there. It's all figuring out what we have, and we're at the point where we're looking at facilities, looking at programmatic needs, looking at enrollment, saying what makes sense, looking at, we're kind of going beyond even some of the capital planning aspect in terms of what revenue has come down from the state and what would that allow us to do in the immediate short term.
Offset your other losses.
Sorry?
So offset your other losses.
Well, that's the thing. They did provide for FY21. There's the 525 that I mentioned that's coming towards adequacy aid, but there's also 666,000 that's coming from the state that is prioritized for infrastructure. So that's money that will come in, and the discussion is, are we going to restrict it as a fund balance, or are we going to move it to the capital reserve to hold on to it and figure out exactly what we're going to do? But that's really the intention of the state for that money.
The state
It says
was
one-time funding.
That's one time.
And they were really clear that they wanted to make it so that instead of having like applying for money and then some committee overseeing how to allocate that based on needs and so forth, they said, if districts have needs, and they kept hearing from districts, like, we need to fix things. So they sort of gave this unencumbered and said, figure out how you want to use it. It's one-time money. I guess if the community puts it toward taxes, that'll help you for 1 year. And boy, you're going to pay for it the next year because it's going to spike right back up again. So, we see it as an opportunity to get after some of the building needs that we've been delaying.
Between that, the capital reserve, and the grant funding that we received for LMS, we have about $1 million after that money's received next year to get at something. So
Some pretty good improvements for $1 million.
You can, but you also have to be very measured in the way you do it, because you need to look long-term. And if you put, the building with the greatest need is Griffin. It's oldest, there are needs there. And if you put that in there, but then in 3 years have a different idea, well, now what have you done? You put $1 million into something that so we want to be really careful and measured in the way we go about doing this. But we also don't want to say, well, let's not do anything in a certain building, because our hope is to do something else. And then the something else never happens and we're in a worse
Exactly where we've
situation.
been for the past, how long have I been on this
Exactly.
committee now?
It's a vicious cycle, right?
1930.
I feel like it sometimes.
So
Three capital committees.
we're really trying to get this right and to get a plan laid out. And I think we need to have something that the town is going to rally behind, so that we know where we're headed and know what to do. And then we can use the money in a wise, efficient way that gets the best bang for the buck going forward. So that's our challenge.
Okay. So anybody have any other questions relative to school budget presentations tonight or school-related items? Right. Well, we thank you guys for
Thank you.
presenting. We thank the department heads for coming and visiting us and the principals.
Yes.
All right, so town business update.
We're 2 days.
Rob.
So I need to get the updated town budget. So anything from the town side that we need to be aware of or?
Oh, we haven't met in a while. We're gonna meet Monday. We have to reintroduce ourselves.
Okay. So the only other thing then from Troy would be the updated budget, since we removed the one
Yep.
position and then he was going to back out all the benefits and other stuff associated with it.
I think so, yeah.
So I don't know that I've seen that, so.
I think that'll probably be on the agenda.
Excellent.
I'll keep you posted.
Wonderful. Are there any other comments or questions people might have relative to the town? All right, hearing none. Is there any member input? Psst, side conversations.
Trying to figure out your schedule here. That's all.
Well, the next meeting will be, we're consistent until Thanksgiving. So we're planned to start budget review on the 5th, which is a Thursday. But we just added the 12/3, the Tuesday. I mean, we could always, we'll take a look at it as we get through,
I would just ask why we're adding before we know we need the time.
because we knew we needed it for the town and this budget's 3-4 times the size.
But
I don't want, because we don't
Well,
have
I'm just
time,
saying-
we don't have time to add them
But if
afterwards.
you add time, then people just talk more instead of doing the work. It would be, to me, you do the work and you add time if you need it.
There is
Some
no-
people have schedules though that they have to, like I sacrifice being able to work to come here. And so it's really helpful for me to know.
And I agree, but
you
some
know.
of us also have schedules where we already have plans for Tuesday. So
Right.
it goes both ways. To
So
me,
the
it's-
concern here is there is no time to add afterwards, where the budget is laid out. If we do not get it done the first day,
then we should stay those nights and finish myself.
there are certain obligations and reasons why we can't stay past like 10 o'clock or 9:45. We lose our cable people at a certain time. Yes? Sure.
I know that you run the risk of not having the superintendent, PA, and the department heads here on the 3rd and the 10th, because 2 nights is a lot, which leaves you at a disadvantage.
Mhm.
Okay, what about instead of those days, you've got an empty date the following week on the 12th? And I think they would be more willing to do that, as long as it's only the one night. I'm just thinking of if you have questions that they're not gonna be able to answer them because they won't be here.
So my concern when looking at adding 2 additional dates is we needed at least one, and that was, we were cutting it close on adding the second date for a $6 million budget. This budget is 4 times the size, a lot more people. So the expectation is, and with people drilling down a lot more, we have people on the budget who will drill down more thoroughly.
Which is all good, but we also, this is the budget season. We shouldn't have,
So in the past,
I'm just saying, we shouldn't have agendas that have 4 other things on them. This should be budget season. We shouldn't be talking about other things than the budget right now.
okay, these are I have copy and pasted from past budget season budgets.
That's right, but I'm just
So this is
telling
the way they've been, and we've also in the past have met Tuesdays and Thursdays through budget season.
not the last 2 years. I'm just pointing out, and the schedule was out.
So then choose not to arrive, but we can either vote on incomplete information, making quick decisions, or we can put the time in to do right by the town. And if after review,
And I'm just respectfully saying, putting the time in is great, but adding time without a need that you know of right away. And in all due respect, I hear a lot of talking that doesn't have anything to do with the budget in these meetings. And if we focused on it and we needed the time, it'd be like, fine. But there's so much wasted time and talk that doesn't have to do with the budget. And that's my concern.
Well, let's go through these reviews and see if people have questions beforehand. We've discussed it. Would not be surprised if we need additional time.
And I'm fine with it. I just hate to budget time if you don't know you need it. You're budgeting time, you don't know you need it. That's against everything as far as scheduling meetings and budgeting. No.
I'm confident we need at least one more, so we can go for the 12th if you'd like to try to do that. We can take a look at everybody's schedules and see if that makes sense. We took a solid, people have described or expressed a concern about staying past 9:45, 10 o'clock. In the past, we've stayed here till 11:30. We have put the time in and we've gotten it done. If people check out at 9:45, we are not doing school right by continuing to plow through if people have mentally disengaged.
And can I also respectfully submit that we get rid of everything but the budget on the next 2 or 3 meetings, so we focus on the budget, not on, and no offense to the town of school, but we don't need updates from the town of school while we're doing the budget.
I don't think we spent more than 30 seconds on the
And I
calendar
agree,
just
but I'm
now.
just saying.
So
if the budget.
These are, again, the agendas, if something comes up, there ought to be an opportunity to review it. Everything in this discussion, the capital planning committee is budget related. Additional meeting dates, budget related. School board, budget related. There's nothing in this thing that we have not been
got
related
here
to.
Because of the prior commitment, almost an hour in, and you haven't started the budget yet. So it's just one of those things. I'm just pointing
All right,
out, we
so-
should be on the budget.
I will just, as I will say, this is not a surprise. These are how these budget meetings have run. I appreciate your concern, but
They're just more efficient in the past, I feel.
excellent.
Well,
So-
and I hear where you're coming from, Rob, but I would say tonight, I mean, the superintendent gave a very detailed and helpful, enrollment projections, which leads into staffing, which leads into
Exactly.
budget. So, he was talking, I looked at the clock, it was about 7:20. So I'd say, we had a little bit in the beginning, we had some discussion, but we did get right to it.
And I think they did a great job of keeping to what we're here for.
I think it was close to 8 o'clock before we actually got into the budgets
Yeah.
with all the floor stuff, and I think we're through that now, so I
Yeah.
think.
And I just think if we need more time, then we should focus on the budget.
Well, I think what you're also trying to maybe hint at is that some of the discussion, when we're in it and we're discussing it, we can get a little, it's hard. The line between policy and budget can be really
And if you
difficult.
watch the school board meetings, Michelle will say, I have the same.
It can be
issue with the
really
school board
difficult
meetings,
to
'cause
keep
we're-
that,
We get off track with that too.
I'm wondering if as a committee and maybe when everyone is here, take 5 minutes to discuss, do we want a procedure? If I do feel sometimes where certain people are feeling, all right, we're kind of veering off, but maybe we don't know how to say it or what signal to give or, how that can be. Maybe we want to develop a procedure or something that people feel, if you feel like we're getting off topic and we're wasting time, I hate to call it that, but I can understand where that feeling comes from. Maybe we need to all feel empowered to put that out there, because if that is the sentiment, I'll just leave it at that.
I have no problem redirecting you.
I just know it gets hard. The policy and budget, it gets hard to
Well, and
delineate
plus
that.
you've got some new members who are not familiar with our budget process and what's in the budget. So the first year is always going to take a little longer.
Oh,
to
it's
explain.
insane to.
But I think you're going to find when we get down to the end of November, that adding the one extra meeting on the Thursday night is probably going to be what you need.
Okay.
But I think just get down to the end of November, see where you are.
Mhm.
If there's too many questions or more questions and not as much understanding as you need, then you gauge it as a committee.
Right.
That's all you can do.
We can have those other dates in our pocket too, and maybe not need them or not
That's
use
We
them.
can always
you know.
cancel. My main concern is to make sure that we haven't,
Mhm.
there's been a lot of people in town who feel that people on this committee are blowing through the budget too quickly. So in an effort to provide an opportunity to show that, no, we're taking this seriously. We want to give it the due diligence. This is a $22 million budget that we should spend time going through. And I don't want anybody to feel rushed. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't ask questions because of a time frame. But there's also compromise, right? I'm fine staying till 11:30. There are people who are not. I'm a night owl. I'll stay up. It's not a big deal. But the compromise is that not everybody here has that same ability to stay up late, and so that means instead of go blowing through that night, I'm willing to come back another night. It's give and take, compromise. So I appreciate your concern. I've heard you out. Perhaps we'll look at the following Thursday, but I truly feel that we have to consider that it's $26 million in one night, or $22 million in one night. That's a big expectation. I don't care how efficient we are if we're trying to get it out by 10 o'clock. The school board took 8 hours? It was an 8-hour day. So if we're starting at 7 and we're finishing up at 9:30, 3 nights is still less than 8 hours. So I appreciate your input. Anybody else have any other member input?
Just like to thank my wife for letting me go out on her birthday and hang with you guys.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, honey.
Any other comments on member input? We lost all our public, so there's none there. So is there a motion? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Motion made. Is there a
Second.
second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? Okay, thanks. We'll see you next week. We'll see you on Thursday, November 20, no, we aren't. Yes. 21st? 21st.
Who wants to get booked to
14th.
Andrew?
14th.
14th.
Sorry, this is November 14th.
She's skipping a week. Watch
I
out.
know, right? See, now we're all super efficient. This is November 14th.
Is there someone that